Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Hope everyone is doing fine. So let's continue with our Blueprism session. So today we are going to understand the importance of processes and objects. Basically, we'll try to understand the concept because if you have implemented or used any other tool like UiPath or Automation Anywhere, also you would have not found this segregation between processes and objects, right? So it's important to understand this in Blueprism. So if you remember, in our last session we imported the default VBOs that Blueprism provides, right? And I just created a demo process. So whatever is coming under this header processes are actually Blueprism processes, and whatever are coming under the header objects actually will be the VBOs, okay, or the objects. And if I just show you, so I had opened the demo process. So it opens in a process studio, and the elements in the studio are different than whatever is there in the object studio. So I just tried to open a MS Excel VBO. So this is the object studio. It is not a process studio but an object studio, and some of the elements here will be different. We'll go in depth in the next sessions, right? So let us try to understand the concept of the processes and objects uh, using an example, okay, using a business process. Okay, so let's assume there is a business process where a business process of actually invoice generation, right? And in that I have like three business, I would say, sequence of business blocks, right? So first activity is like uh, reading email input. So there will be a user who will read the invoice input data from the email. Then he will go into the invoice creation application and try to insert those data and submit. That in turn will generate an invoice number. Now he will take the invoice number, and he will open the status Excel. He will insert the invoice number and date and other details, and he will update the status. There will be also a step basically where he will also verify for duplicate. So he will before creating the invoice, he will first go in the Excel and check if the invoice has already been generated. If yes, then he will not generate the invoice again. Otherwise he will create the invoice. Okay, so the same things when we implement using Blueprism. So the steps done by the user will be replaced by the Blueprism, right? So the overall, this is the sequence of process, right? The sequence of the process blocks, like there is a block to read email, email input. There is a block to create that invoice number, and there is a block to update the status in Excel. But inside each block there will be some sequence of steps, right? There will be series of steps. Like, let's see what will be the steps. So to read an email, the user or the Blueprism has to go and interact with the email client, right? So basically let's say if I'm using Outlook, so let's say Blueprism will first open the Blueprism email client. Then he will read that particular request, the data from that request to generate invoice. Then it will go and for the second step, right, to generate an invoice, what it is going to do is it will first go and try to log in to the invoice web application. Then it will insert the invoice data which it collected from email, and then it will submit the invoice. And then once the invoice number is generated, it will take the invoice number, go to the Excel. It will first open the Excel actually, then insert a new row in that Excel, and then it will update the status though. So there are some sequence of steps for each of these blocks, right? And on top of it there will be some sort of a business or technical or system exception, right? So basically business exception is which is basically defined as a rule, business rule. Like for example, if like for example, as I said, right, I will take not I mean to say the bot will take the request, let's say, and it will go and first validate the request. So maybe some date is missing, or amount is missing, so it will check if all the data is like all the mandatory data is available or not. So that can, this is a business rule, right? Also, let's say I'm uh, like the bot is checking that there are no duplicate records already available in the Excel, right? So that's also a business rule, right? Similarly, for invoice application also, there might be some business rule, like let's say if the date is if the invoice creation date is more than 3 days, it might go to a separate approval process. And also there can be business rules set for each of the blocks, right? And there can be system exception, like let's say while trying to interact with the email, it failed to read the email data, maybe because there was a pop-up, or there was the email client hanged. The same way for invoice also, let's say there is some unknown exception coming up, right? So those are all will be covered in the system exception. Anyways, don't worry, we'll cover this in our exception sessions. We'll cover in detail. So I'm just giving you an idea. So those all things will be there in a complete business process. This you will need to consider all these things to um, implement it, right? So there is a, as I said, there is a process flow of processes, right? A flow of process blocks, like opening of an email, then it will go and generate invoice, then it will update status, and then there are mm, in the lower level there are interactions. So for each blocks, person has to interact with an application. For email, it has to interact with the email client. For the invoice generation, it has to interact with the invoice web application. For the status update, it has to interact with the Excel, right? And then there are business and technical exceptions. So let's see what all steps will go in processes and what all steps will go in the objects, right? So inside the processes, you will have that sequence of those business blocks will be in the processes. Okay, uh, even the sub steps, right? What I said, right? Open, email, all these steps, the sequence of the steps will be in the processes. Okay, but each steps implementation, like when I say open email, so actually going to the or actually interacting with that email client to open it, will be implemented in the object layer, like opening email client or updating the status in Excel. So actually going and updating the status in Excel will be there in the objects side. Okay, then exception handlings like loops and all, right? Let's say I want to retry if some activity is not working and I want to retry, those will be there in the process blocks. Okay, or if there is any business rules, if I say like I'm checking the date greater than 3 days, or no not or amount, some amount check or mandatory field check, all these things, business rules will be in the processes. In the objects, we'll have more of the system exception, because that is the level where it will go and interact with the applications, and system exceptions will come when the bot is trying to interact with that application. The application will throw system exceptions. Okay, so that's the system exceptions will be uh, okay, the handling might be done in processes, right? But the system exceptions will come in the objects. Okay, and then the interaction with each application element, let's say I have a login screen, so there will be a username text box, there will be a password text box, right? So ideally we have to go and the bot should be identifying each text box and entering the details, right? So that level of interaction of that to with that elements in the page, right, those will be done in the object studio. Okay, okay, so let's now see the process studio first. So if you see in the process studio, so I have all the three major blocks here, right? So this is not yet implemented, right? So I mean, we'll show the implementation after, as I said, going through other elements, and then we'll show the implementation. So let's say this is these are the sequence of the blocks, right? First is read get data from email, then insert invoice data into the invoice application, and then update the status. And then there are some sub steps, right? So like open email, read email, validate email, then there is a validation check, otherwise it will, let's say the data is not valid, then it will throw a business exception, right? Similarly, in the next block it will log into the invoice app, insert the data, submit, read the invoice number, and then finally it will close that invoice application. If there is any exception, right, technical exception, okay, that is coming up, it will actually do a retry. So that retry block is here, right? It will retry 3 times to insert the data, right? Then it will update the status in the Excel. So it will open Excel, insert row and close. So these are just steps. As I said, these are just sequence of steps. Real implementation. So this is called action. We'll cover these things later, but I'm just to make you understand, I'm saying this is a type of action, right? This is an action stage. So when action stage means from here we are going to call a object, some action in the object. So let's see, let's assume that I'm opening an Excel. So basically I'll be calling the Excel VBO and call a open instance action in the Excel VBO. See, so basically the real implementation of this open Excel will be inside this object studio. Here you will, as I showed you, right, open instance. So it will have a open instance somewhere here. Wait, yeah, open instance. Okay, so let me increase the percentage. Okay, so this is an open instance. So from the process layer we are calling the this layer for the actual implement. So here it is going to interact with the Excel, and then it will try to open the Excel. Okay, and that's where I said so it increases the reusability factor. Okay, so as I said, okay, I think I have not covered the benefits of using a process and object segregation. So let's quickly go through that. So when we do this thing, right, that we have a process and then we have an object where the actual implementation is there. So what are the benefits I feel we have is, as compared to other tools, like first is it increases the readability of the code, right? Second is it enforces reusability of the VBO, and third is easy to adapt the changes in the application that are being automated. So basically, if I'm using, let's say I'm using the invoice application and there is a new version of that application that came up, right? So sorry, yeah, new version of the application that came up, right? So we need to adjust our automation to adapt to those new changes. Let's say a new login module has been added. Basically they integrated with a new login system, so the login screen has changed now. So our bot needs to be adapted to that changes, right? So that it can read the new elements in the screen, right? So it is easier to adapt to the changes. Okay, let's understand these 3 points from the example I showed you in the Blueprism, right? So let's say in the process, right, for any person who does not know Blueprism, it is easy for him to understand, right? Even a user comes and tries to see the code, maybe he has not implemented, but he will definitely understand, okay, what the bot is trying to do is it is opening the email, it is reading the email, it's validating the email, right? And then it is checking if the data is validated or not, is the valid or not, or if it is valid, if yes, it is going this side, going ahead, if no, it is going to a business exception. So it's easy readable, right? The process is easy readable. Another thing what I said is reusability. Now let's say that I for example, uh, let me go to an example. Let's say I have which one should I take? Okay, let's say I'm writing a collection. Anyways, I'm writing some data. Just assume that I'm writing some data into Excel, right? Maybe let's say there is some change in the way there's a new version of Excel and there are some change and this writing does not work any longer, right? Now this action has been used in multiple processes. Here I showed a demo process. Let's say there are multiple business processes, invoice generation, let's say account opening, or a registration process. There are multiple processes which is actually trying to write data into Excel. Okay, now if I so there is a, as I said, there is this way of writing into the Excel has changed, right? Now if I change only is this action, we can easily adapt to all those 4 or 5 processes, right? Because all of them are calling this action only, so it is reusable, right? My amount of, if there would have been different actions for different processes, then my work would have been increased, because that will be duplicated, right? I'm doing duplicate activity, I'm updating the same similar code in multiple VBOs, right? But since we are pointing to the same VBO action, so the adaptation is very easier. It will be very easy, right? The same way now, this is an Excel. So in Excel we are not interacting with application modeler. We'll understand this also in the later stage. So basically when you have to but if you have like any other application, right? Let's say, as I said, invoice application or something, so we'll use application modeler to read those or spy those elements, like let's say drop down or a radio button. All those things will interact, will what how should I say, or rather say, we say it is spying actually. Okay, so we will be spying those elements using application modeler, right? The same way there, let's assume that if I would have a login module, okay, login VBO, let's assume I would have a login VBO. So basically there I would have the application modeler with which would have spied all the elements in the login screen, right? So if there is any change, as I said, it is easy to adapt to that change. It's the same way, like, because let's say 10 processes are actually calling this login module, login VBO. So if I update only one VBO, so it will be all the 10 processes will get updated, right? So because implementation is happening only in one VBO, right? Of course we might need to test all the 10 applications separately. Testing is another thing which is important, but overall, making change in one place will help solving the problem for 10 processes, right? So that's why it is easy to adapt for the changes in the application. I hope this is clear, and I hope you got to know, or you understood what all will be there in the processes, what all elements will be there in the processes, and what all will be in the VBO layer. We'll definitely try. Don't worry if there is still some confusion. We'll when we go to the real implementation, you'll be able to understand this in a better way. But to give, it is important to give you this concept, because while designing and all also, it is important to understand the intent of a VBO and a process, so that you can design it correctly, and then your automation, you build a strong automation solution for it, right? So this brings the end of our video for today. We will continue on next session. Hope you like the video. Please subscribe to our channel to learn with us about Blueprism and RPA in general. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day. See you in the next session. Bye bye.